Welcome then to this week's edition of the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound. The 9th. And we have some points of analysis and indeed action for you to undertake. So, again, Webster Tarpley program on Unbound Radio. Now, we want to talk significantly about U.S. domestic stuff, about the impact of the sequester, killer cuts, genocidal austerity. Don't buy the reactionary Republican, Tea Party, Libertarian, International Monetary Fund, Wall Street, they're all the same argument that you can cut the budget and there are no results. Ask the 18 people, the 18 firefighters who died out there in the West in that fire. Ask the people who were killed or maimed on the San Francisco Asiana plane crash. Ask the kids who are getting thrown out of Head Start so they miss the 2 hot meals of the day that they get, which they otherwise might not get. So we're going to talk about that. And ask the students who are now, since life has to go on, paying double the interest, 6.8%. The interest rate on the Stafford loan has doubled. These are high crimes. This is absolute insanity. And the entire Republican budget argument has been essentially destroyed by, among other things, by the fact that the various quackademics who were writing things about how increased government debt slows economic growth, they're now exposed. They were quackademics. They were charlatans. They were cooking the books. They should actually be indicted for fraud because undoubtedly they were either defrauding the institutions they worked for, or if any government money got in there, then they can be indicted for that. But now let's look first of all at Egypt, right? Great event in our time. The changes in Egypt, and of course we see this not just as something far away, but we're working here with the perspective which I tried to outline at the Left Forum in New York City at the beginning of June. It's about a month ago, and I must say this the Left Forum perspective that I put forward is coming true even faster than I thought. I was talking about a strike upsurge worldwide in 2014, 2015 as a product of the ups and downs of the Depression. And now what we've seen is mass strike upsurges in Turkey, in Brazil, and now in Egypt, because this has profound economic causes which the controlled media don't tell you about. And if it can come to Turkey, to Brazil, and to Egypt, it's coming here. It's coming to the United States. So, are you ready? Well, if you're following Amy Goodman, Noam Chomsky, Michael Moore, Daniel Ellsberg, you're not ready. You're essentially a part of the problem, not of the solution. And if you're going with Ron Paul and Rand Paul and Ted Cruz, you're going to be one of the scabs and the strike breakers and wreckers who will come out and try to stop this. Or if you're following Comrade Kukesh and his merry gang, you're going to be on the wrong side of history. So, you'll be back here just a minute on the program of the Unbound Radio Network. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. I want to call your attention to an article which I've got posted on tarpley.net, wrote it over the last couple of days. It's about the dynamics of the counter-coup in Egypt, because that's what it is. It's a counter-coup. You call it a coup, but it's really a counter-coup. It's a coup d'etat to stop a war coup. President Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood, this subversive association, This was not founded by Moslem clerics, people. This was founded by British intelligence in 1928 as a wrecking operation against modern Egypt. It was founded by the British to try to counterbalance the nationalist tendencies then coming to the fore in the biggest Egyptian political party at that time was the WAFD, W-A-F-D. And nationalism, of course, means anti-colonialism. Kick the British out. The British had been exercising a really illegal protectorate over Egypt, which had never had any legal justification. But the WAFD was developing a nationalist wing. So the British went in there and said, we'll counter them by a cultural populist exercise that you got to have Islamic values, and the Islamic values turn out to mean that you're a stooge for imperialism. So what it shows is that any religion can be made into ideology. Any one of them. Doesn't matter. And it's always a tragedy to see this done and to see people fooled by the religious label, whereas what's going on is a pure exercise in cynical power. So take a look at tarpley.net as always, and you can see also the updates on Webster G. Tarpley Twitter feed that went into this. So what's the finding? Well, counter-coup. The question, let's just get this one out of the way, right? Every correspondent in the world is saying, oh, the U.S. government can't call this a coup because if the U.S. government calls it a coup, they have to cut off the U.S. aid. This is complete garbage. No, the president controls foreign policy. I don't even care what's in the statute. The Constitution has the president making foreign policy. He can do what he wants and then let the courts worry about this, right? If he wants to keep paying the 1.5 billion to the Egyptian military primarily, he can go ahead and do that. And of course, even the statute says if there's a coup, a military coup or some other coup, if there's a coup, the U.S. aid has to be cut off unless the president is willing to certify that continuing the payments is necessary to U.S. national security. So it's easy to do. You can say, well, as distasteful as I find a coup, I'd like to continue with this money. There's even another angle, which is that some of this money is a treaty obligation. Some of this is Camp David money. It goes back to 1978, Carter, Begin, and Sadat. And part of the deal is that if Egypt signs Camp David, the U.S. has to pay this money. So if the U.S. doesn't pay the money, some people in Egypt might say, well, then we dump the treaty with Israel. So I very much doubt that people in the State Department want that to happen. And the bedrock is president makes foreign policy. Congress can't tie his hands with these strings. Anyway, this is simply a rebellion against the idiocy of every correspondent, I think, in the world in the last 24 to 48 hours. Anyway, it's not precisely a coup, it's a counter-coup. And I say this advisedly. It is not a good idea to engage in the overthrow of governments unless there's a compelling reason. And I say this here in a country like the United States, where the cold coup, the palace coup, sometimes under the cover of an election, sometimes under the cover of an assassination. This is now one of the pillars of the way this place is governed, if you want to call it governed. So don't do this lightly. But is there a compelling reason? I'm afraid in this case there is. To stop a catastrophic foreign war. Or wars, because it's more than one. In the case of Morsi, and you see this in the article that I'm continuously pointing you to, we find that Morsi is guilty of a conspiracy to embroil Egypt in not one, but two wars, and one of those, well, maybe both of them, are open-ended. In other words, they could spread far beyond a simple bilateral war. It could become a general war, a general war in the Horn of Africa and North Africa, the sort of southern Mashrak, I guess you can call it, and of course the general war that would start with Syria. At the beginning of June, just to get this one out of the way, because we won't talk too much about this, although this is a real war. It's a very, very serious matter. You have the Nile, right? And this, of course, is the lifeblood of Egypt. The Nile goes into Sudan, and then at Khartoum, at the site of the Hilton Hotel, as I can tell you, the Nile divides into two parts. The White Nile continues down into Uganda and the Lake District of Africa. The Blue Nile goes off to the east into Ethiopia. And of course, Ethiopia, acting in a laudable, I would say, understandable, laudable, rational project of national development, Ethiopia wants to do some damming. They want dams. The Tennessee Valley Authority teaches us the entire thing. You've got to do this to control floods, to get irrigation, for hydroelectric power, and to fight malaria and other diseases, right? So it's absolutely essential. So these Muslim Brotherhood crazies, Salafists and crazies around Morsi, held a meeting at the beginning of June where they were on TV, but they didn't realize they were on TV. And they talked about, we're gonna stop Ethiopia from building this dam because it might have some influence on the amount of water. Although Lake Nasser is full of water. I've flown over it, and you see this huge lake that goes for hundreds of miles on the upper Nile, in southern Egypt. These Islamists, these, again, reckless, irresponsible, crazy, terroristic people say, well, what we'll do is, we'll foment a rebellion inside Ethiopia. We will fund terror groups in Ethiopia to sabotage the dam, and or we'll send the Egyptian Air Force to bomb the dam. And of course, these amateurs, right, rank incompetence, right? This is worse than a crime. It's an error. They didn't know that they were on live TV. So the entire incendiary discussion goes over the television. And you'd think that Morsi would come out and say, no, I'm committed to peace. He doesn't do that. He comes out on TV and says all options are open, okay? So that's bad enough. That's already grounds to overthrow the guy. Because what he's trying to do, as you can just hear, right, by funding terror groups and then by somehow hijacking the Egyptian Air Force, this is already extra constitutional. He's not talking about any process of law. And then the other one, of course, is Syria. And it goes back to these events around the middle of June. One is on the 13th of June. We have this gathering of extremists, sectarians. It's called the Position of the Egyptian Nation's Scholars on the Developments in Syria. And Morsi attended this. And these were warmonger extremists, Sunni sectarians, saying that we got to do something about Syria. And one of the people there is this guy Qaradawi. Now, when you think of Al Jazeera, think about the Arabic service, the one you don't see here, right? Here you see in the West, you see British advisors. Their venom and animus, their anti-Americanism is clear enough. But this Qaradawi is several degrees worse. Qaradawi appears on the Arabic service of Al Jazeera, estimated 60 million viewers. The program is called Sharia and Life. And Qaradawi incites violence. And he just incites violence. He says, Mr. X, why is he still alive? Why doesn't somebody go and liquidate Mr. X or Madame Y or things like this? In other words, the direct incitement of violence and mayhem, not some theoretical proposition, the infidels and heretics should be wiped out. No, but specific people should be wiped out. So Morsi went to that and didn't distance himself. At this meeting, one of the propositions they developed is that Egyptian citizens can and should volunteer to go to Syria and fight in the war. And a government official of Syria, one of Morsi's helpers, actually said, this is Morsi's presidential coordinator for foreign affairs, named Khaled al-Kazaz. He says, look, it's Egypt. You can go to Syria and fight. There's no prohibition. The right to travel is open. So a call to volunteers. Then, even worse, the next day. This is really the big one. This is at a rally of about 20,000 people at an indoor stadium in Cairo. And here we have a speech by Morsi where he says, we're breaking diplomatic relations with Syria. We have decided to close down the Syrian embassy in Cairo. The Egyptian envoy in Damascus will be withdrawn. And the people of Egypt and its army will not leave Syrians until their rights are granted and the newly elected leadership is chosen. Now, this is a serious matter. Libya and Tunisia had already broken diplomatic relations, right? Two Arab Spring puppet states, Tunisia especially run by the Muslim Brotherhood, right? These slimy characters. The second problem, though, is that Egypt and Syria were for a time one country. This was the United Arab Republic from 58 to 61. At the high tide of Nasser's pan-Arabism, we had, this was one country, one flag. And the flag, the Syrian flag with the two stars, that still is the flag that they had during that time. I think the two stars are Egypt and Syria. So then Morsi says, we should have a no-fly zone over Syria, a no-fly zone. But then he says, at the same time, no foreign intervention. Now, this is the classic Muslim Brotherhood double talk. We need a no-fly zone, call for a no-fly zone, but no foreign intervention. And then he says, what he means by foreign intervention is Hezbollah has to get out of Syria, no place for Hezbollah in Syria. He's got his advisors, some of his advisors are Salafists. He claims that there's a campaign of extermination led by foreign countries, and he doesn't mean Qatar and Saudi Arabia that fund the death squads. He means Iran and Hezbollah that are sending people in. So, Syria got the idea right away. Syria said, Morsi has joined the conspiracy of incitement led by the United States and Israel against Syria. This is irresponsible. We condemn it. But then, in the same rally, we had other of these extreme, irresponsible sectarians. They're saying, down with the infidels, and infidels means Shiites. So Shiites in Egypt are bad. It's about 1%. Shiites in Syria or Iran or Hezbollah, these are all bad. So you get the idea. Now, the army was appalled. The army put out a démenti the next day, and we'll give you more about this in just a minute on the Webster Tarpley program. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio, the afternoon of Tuesday, July 9th. The counter-coup in Egypt is therefore the military stopping Morsi and his Muslim Brotherhood gang from embroiling Egypt in 2+ wars, one with Ethiopia and one with Syria. And the evidence is public. In the case of Ethiopia, it's a confab of crazies talking about how they're going to start a war with Ethiopia. And in the case of Syria, it's from the horse's mouth, meaning at this rally in Cairo on the 15th, Morsi shot his mouth off about breaking diplomatic relations, and it was a very, rhetorical performance. He's up there with Karadawi, who, wants everybody around Assad dead yesterday. So there are two issues, right? One is the Morsi entourage says we're encouraging people, to go, right? They're calling for volunteers to go and fight on the terrorist side in Syria. But then there's even the question of the Egyptian military, right? There's a formidable military establishment there. And it's clear that after trying the Kerry coup, right? After John Forbes Kerry of Skull and Bones tried a coup here in Washington on the afternoon of June 12th, he wanted to start the bombing right away, I think without reference to Obama, in the great Kissinger and Al Gore tradition. That failed, right? Dempsey and others stopped it. So the imperialists are looking around. How can we attack Syria, right? The urgency for them is the death squads are losing. The death squads are being wiped out. The Syrian army is attacking Homs, advancing on Homs, advancing on Aleppo, clearing out many, many villages. The rebels are in retreat just about everywhere. They're suffering heavy losses. This is one of the largest pools of terrorists anywhere in the world. They've come all the way from Morocco and Chechnya and Somalia and Afghanistan. Every crazy in the world has flocked into Syria, and they're getting killed. So, despite in quite the opposite of what you've heard from the U.S. government, the CIA wants to keep them alive so they can fight another day, right? You can use them. So they got to do something, right? Can Turkey intervene? No. Erdogan is too weak. He's been stunned by the backlash in the streets against his authoritarian rule. And remember that Erdogan has gone pretty far down this Muslim Brotherhood road himself. He's not the Turkey of Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, one of my great men of the 20th century. No, he's much more like the Muslim Brotherhood founded by British intelligence. So they obviously then they turn to Egypt, another big army in the neighborhood. Can you get Egypt to do it? And Morsi is open to it, but the army says no. The very day after Morsi made this warmonger speech, the military issued a veiled rebuke, apparently bland, according to the Irish Times, but sharp-edged. I'm trying to find the text of this, and I can't find it. Maybe somebody can help me. Where is the army statement of the 16th of June or thereabouts, saying the only role of the Egyptian military is to guard the borders of the nation, not to look for fights elsewhere. According to Yasser El-Shimi of the International Crisis Group, the armed forces were alarmed by these Syrian conferences because it came at a time of political crisis. I would say this is no coincidence. This may be Morsi saying, well, I've got a domestic crisis going here. Maybe I can consolidate myself by starting a foreign war and riding a wave of chauvinism and hysteria. So the word is, though, that by doing this, the Morsi group crossed a national security red line. And not only with the army. We now have Al-Ahram online June 16th. Top bureaucrats, now the Egyptian bureaucracy, formidable, goes back to the Turks, right? They're horrified. They're concerned that Morsi is going over. More about it in just a minute. Another segment now of the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. It's the 9th of July, Tuesday afternoon. Just wrapping up this picture on the counter-coup in Egypt. Let's cut through all the nominalism and idiocy. There's a counter-coup. It's a coup designed to stop a coup that's already in motion, aiming at war with Ethiopia, war with Syria, wider wars. And it's not just the Egyptian army that was appalled by this. They were certainly appalled, but also the bureaucracy. The Egyptian bureaucracy going back to the Ottoman Empire, the era of the Khedive, the British, Nasser, it's a formidable power. They're not happy with this performance by Morsi in the mass meeting with 20,000 people in Cairo in the indoor stadium on June 15th when he broke diplomatic relations with Syria and was hinting at sending volunteers, and worse, right? The idea was sending the army as much as he could. According to Al-Ahram, powerful bureaucrats saw the damage coming from this performance by Morsi as irreversible. The breaking of diplomatic relations with Syria was a decision by the president against the advice of the top people in the foreign ministry and the presidential office. There's also the fact that Morsi had talked about a 4-power contact group to try to mediate or solve the Syrian crisis. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, and Egypt, right? Historical countries that have been there. At least Turkey, Iran, and Egypt are countries that have continuously existed for many hundreds of years, unlike, say, Syria or Iraq or Jordan or some of the others, right? These are continuous countries. Of course, Iraq, Mesopotamia goes way back, but there's a time when it sort of disappears. But Egypt, Iran, Turkey, this is continuous. So the message was, you're dumping Iran, but wait a minute, then you've dumped the whole thing because you can't mediate if you don't have Iran, because that's the main ally of Syria. So you can't stack the deck having Egypt and Turkey and Saudi Arabia. That won't work. So the interpretation in the bureaucracy was Egypt was dumping any hope of good relations with Tehran and completely joining the U.S. and Saudi puppet camp. And then, even worse, extremely ominous was viewed by top Egyptian civil servants that by doing this, Morsi was taking sides, trying to commit Egypt to a devastating Sunni Shiite war. And we've talked about this, right? The main U.S. policy is a Sunni front of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, other countries, Gulf states, against the Shiite front, which is Hezbollah, Iran, and then the Alawite government there in Syria. So this you want to stay out of. And it's also, there was also a discontent in the bureaucracy that Morsi was kowtowing to Saudi Arabia way too much to try to get money. And of course the Saudi approach to Syria is completely sectarian, as this article points out, right? It's completely, we love the Sunnis, we hate the Shiites, and that simply won't cut it in the modern Middle East. So I would applaud the officers. I hope that there are Nasserist officers in the Egyptian military who looked at this, or Nasserists in the bureaucracy who said, look, we're Egypt, we're not a banana republic here, we're not going to be used in this way. Even the leftists got the idea. The April 6th movement says Morsi is acting as a tool of the U.S. campaign against Syria. Quote, the decision to open the doors of jihad against Syria is coming from Washington, and it's sponsored by Salafist sheiks. That means Saudi puppets. So this is Tamarod talking, right? Tamarod, the group that got all the signatures and sort of got the golden youth in the Tahrir. Morsi's speech reveals that the Syria file has been handed over from Qatar to Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and that Morsi is acting under U.S. instructions. You get it? So, on the whole, this coup, I say, is a better option than letting that war occur. And again, you don't do this lightly. Morsi, remember this constitution this is not a constitution in the same way that the U.S. has one. The U.S. Constitution was completely written, and then there were elections, right? You have the Constitution first, and then you elect president and Congress and found the federal government. The problem with the Egyptian method is that the Constitution was going parallel to the creation of the government. So there was a lot of back and forth. There was, for example, the packing of the Constitutional Convention with Islamists, right? So that the other groups and the other traditions were not sufficiently represented. There's also the fact that as of last July, a court overturned the existence of the parliament. So there's been no parliament. There's been no check and balance in that sense, and there's been no re-election to the parliament. And then in November, December, Morsi comes up with his own decree saying, I'm radically expanding my powers and I'm above judicial review. So you cannot really say that there's this, perfect formal Apollonian, legality, that everything was done precisely according to all the legal formalism. It was not. So it's not comparable. And then, in terms of the political substance, last November, Morsi sold out to the International Monetary Fund. The campaign of Morsi and of the Muslim Brotherhood in general was, we will raise the standard of living of the poor people. Instead, they double the price of gasoline, begin to attack the subsidies on bread, cooking oil, other foods, household fuels, things like this. They have a big increase in the sales tax. They talk about instituting a value-added tax. It's a complete sellout to the International Monetary Fund. It gives up sovereignty, too. It's something that Egypt should never have to go through. And then that's the political preparation for the counter-coup is that. That's what makes the the counter-coup possible politically. But then in the institutions, it's this June 13th, 14th, and 15th performance by Morsi. So he's talking about a war. Now, a lot of people don't get this. Let's just look at it. There's a lot of babbling, really low-level nonsense about, the U.S. controls the Egyptian military. I don't think they do. And the U.S. will continue to pay this money, I'm pretty sure, simply because the military are now the winners. They've taken significant power. Now, naturally, we have ideas about what they should do with it. We're interested in Hamdin Sabahi here, and we're interested in breaking with the International Monetary Fund. And that is not a utopia, precisely because the Egyptian army has so much in the way of 30-40% of the economy is theirs. Austerity measures, IMF conditionalities are going to hit the army in the purse, in their economic existence as well. So you have to be very careful what you know. People say, there was a phone call between General Sisi, the defense minister, and Chuck Hagel here in the Pentagon. And that means that the U.S. approved the coup. Doesn't mean that at all. It means that Sisi called him up and said, we're going to overthrow Morsi. Hope that's okay with you. Just wanted to let you know. Bye-bye. And Hagel, what's Hagel going to do? Hagel, there's also that it's even possible, although I don't know, that Hagel and Obama might say, we really don't want this Syrian war to get any bigger or any more, widespread than it is, because the only thing that could be is trouble for Obama. And remember, Obama is happy to send drones, assassins. He's happy to bomb. He's happy to use sanctions, cyber warfare, and all the rest of it. But he does not want to have the 1,000 bombers and the 5 divisions. And what the British and the French want, they want to fight to the last American. They want the 1,000 bomber raid and the 5 divisions and the entire U.S. Navy concentrated in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and the Arabian Sea, Gulf of Aqaba, and all the rest of it. So, don't believe, unless you have compelling evidence, which I just don't see, that this coup is a U.S. coup. It's not a U.S. coup. It's against the U.S. in the sense that since 2011, and it goes back way before this, I have told you there's a worldwide alliance of the CIA with the Muslim Brotherhood. And you could see that when Bruce Riedel began writing at the time of the first Egyptian tumults. Oh, the Muslim Brotherhood, they've mellowed, they're really good guys now. And I guess we have to conclude, no, they're not, based on what we've seen. They're no good. And they're duplicitous, right? It's not like they represent a higher standard of morality. They do not. Quite the contrary. Now, let's just look at who says what. The people who basically get the idea, well, Thierry Mason at the Voltaire Network has a pretty good article essentially saying this coup is positive, it's a defeat for the U.S. Let me just add, by the way, Syria. Syria, of course, says once the coup occurs, this is the definitive downfall, the defeat of political Islam, meaning the Qatar-controlled Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood with this is defeated in the entire Middle East, says President Assad of Syria. The Syrian-Egyptian diplomatic relations, which had been cut by Morsi on June 15th, were quickly restored after the coup. What does that mean? The U.S. wants everybody to break diplomatic relations with Syria, the way the U.S. and the NATO puppets have. But Egypt went in the opposite direction. It restored diplomatic relations with Assad. So Mason basically has the right idea. I don't think he gives enough attention to the IMF as the main cause in terms of public opinion. And I don't think he's aware of the fact that there was this anti-Syrian campaign led by Morsi. Also on the Voltaire Network, you have Bill Engdahl. It's a somewhat diluted version of Mason. And of course with Engdahl, it's everything is tectonic. Every time something happens, it's a tectonic shift. Well, maybe for once it is tectonic. I certainly hope so. I'll be happy to embrace the tectonic if it turns out that way. I was on Press TV last night with Ralph Schoenman, former secretary to Bertrand Russell and the Bertrand Russell Tribunal, and I'm afraid a Marxist. And his view is it's all bad. This is only the U.S. This is all the CIA. No good. And he wants a workers' party. The problem with this is, what's the Workers' Party going to be? Is there going to be a communist party in Egypt? Well, if we go back, I'm just guessing now, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. If we go back to the height of the power of the Soviet Union when Khrushchev was helping Egypt to build the Aswan High Dam, I'd be surprised if the Communist Party of Egypt got more than 10% of the vote, 15% at the very most. How are you going to have a workers' party or a communist party, a Marxist workers' party of the type that Ralph Schoenman wants? Where are you going to get that? Whereas I would say, what I'm trying to point to, the Hamdin Sabahi Nasserists, that is 21% of the vote in the most recent elections, and it's a deeply rooted tradition in the army and the bureaucracy. So I think that is realistic. I'm afraid what Ralph is talking about is a utopia, and we'll be back here in just a minute. Welcome to our concluding segment here on the Webster Tarpley program, the edition of Tuesday, July 9th, 2013. So, essentially, Voltaire Network, Thierry Mason, get it right. They're offering what we can say critical support to the coup. Ralph Schoenman is really schematic view, I'm afraid, right, seen through the lens of Marxist categories, which were always dubious and apply even less to a situation like this. The Marxist categories really ignore the main features of the situation you actually have. Kevin Barrett wants to defend the integrity of political Islam, and I'm afraid this is also an impossible task. Unfortunately, whether people call themselves Islamic or not, this guarantees nothing. I've tried to point out elsewhere that you can go back to the wars of religion in France in the 1500s, and you'll see the historical accounts, which include an actual conscious decision by the French aristocracy to clothe their eternal rebellion in the cloak of Calvinism, to say, well, if we come out and say we're the feudal nobility, support us, not many peasants are going to want to support their local feudal lord. But if you come out and say we represent Holy Calvin and we're the Huguenot party, then you might get some peasants and some others. So the idea is it's a market of dupes. And what the Muslim Brotherhood does, and you can see this, even Sharon understood this, is the use of charity and social solidarity is calculated. It's cynical and demagogic because it's trying to convince people that you're for the poor. But then once you get power, look what they did. They sold out to the International Monetary Fund, and they betrayed precisely the people who needed their help the most. So the idea that the Muslim Brotherhood represents a superior standard of conduct or morality, it's impossible, because Morsi was the biggest liar, right? Muslim Brotherhood said, we will not have a candidate for president, and boy, then did they ever, not one but two or three, and then tried to take all power, right? No checks and balances. This is the old, what you'll hear from the neocons. They'll say the Muslim Brotherhood motto, one man, one vote, one time. And there is unfortunately something to that. And that will not go away now. But the main issue is the war with Syria. Again, I would not overthrow Morsi because he's a liar. When it gets to the IMF, I think you might want to struggle against that through mass strikes. But when it comes to starting these wars, I'm afraid that is the point at which the counter-coup becomes quite legitimate. Now, I had wanted to talk about the Civil War. I urge you to check on tarpley.net, other broadcasts later this week. Austerity and the mass strike, we mentioned it already, right? The student loan crisis, the San Francisco plane crash is a direct result of the sequester. We know that one of the landing systems was not working. That could be the one that would have saved the plane. 500 forest workers, Forest Service firefighters were sacked, and now we have 18 dead. This is a tragedy. The Huffington Post today has, I would recommend, an article by Sam Stein, of all people. Sequestration pushes Head Start families to the precipice, and this is thousands and thousands of families, one they tell you about in Pratt, Kansas, who need the daycare, the teaching, learn English, and the hot meals that you get through this. And this is, the places are now being shut down. The other one I want to mention in the few remaining minutes, Petraeus, David Petraeus, if you are in or near New York City, you have a chance to do something for this warmonger Petraeus, right? This is the main focus of Bonapartism and coup d'etat. And you can see that there's a big effort in the ruling elite to transfer large amounts of money into the pockets of Petraeus. This is Kohlberg, Kravis, Roberts, possibly paying part of this, but City University of New York, the infamous CUNY, C-U-N-Y, it's CCNY, Brooklyn College, Queens College, and so forth. They've offered Petraeus a teaching post. He's going to get $200,000 for teaching one class for one term. And this is, 10, 20 people in the class. It has been calculated that $200,000 that are going to be paid to Petraeus would allow the payment of tuition and fees for 26 poor students, or 120 students could get their books and supplies paid for. I'm hoping that people like Randy Credico and other stalwarts in the New York area will pick up on this issue. Kick Petraeus out. No penny of public funds or CUNY funds for the coup artist Petraeus, who should be in the dock defending himself on subversion charges. and we'll be back next week on the Webster Tarpley program.